And I said, unless somebody walks you through how to break that addictive cycle that you're in, I said, you'll live out the rest of your life not paying your bills on time. But that's a choice you can make.
I guess just before we move on to your books and your seminars and stuff like that, you've also mentioned obviously that you work with a young Tony Robbins, and he's obviously gone on to make quite an extraordinary impact in the seminar business and things like that. And I guess it just really, what were your memories of him? And was he stand out at the time, or was he just another young guy wanting to make it big, or what were your kind of memories of that?
A little bit of both of that. He did stand out because he was 6'7". So now I'm 6'4", and I seldom have to look up to anybody, but I had to look up to Tony. So he's 6'7". His hands are about twice as big as mine. So when you shake hands, it wraps around you twice. But he was a young kid, kind of out of shape a little bit and a little bit gawky, and not dressed well. But basically we cleaned him up. He cleaned himself up. But the thing I noticed about Tony was that he was so intent on making something happen. And I mentioned before, we had over 300 salespeople. And I think it was the second month that Tony was there, he was number one in sales. And I remember one night, one evening, giving him a book, Psycho-Cybernetics. And I said, here, read this, is a great book. He came back the next day, he had read the whole book. And not only did he read it, but he understood it. And he could quote it, he could tell me what it meant. And I went, wow, this kid's really got something. I mean, he just had that ability to comprehend and grasp things that most people don't. And, so, but at the same time, I would never have thought that he would do what he's done today. Just never would have conceived that he would do that. But you see it evolve, and then he got on his infomercial, that television infomercial. Well, that thing ran for, I believe, I heard anyway, I don't know if this is 100%, but I heard it ran every 5 minutes somewhere in the world for 8 years. So that's one way to become famous, So, Tony's done such a good job, and every time I see Tony or see him on video or see him on Facebook or someplace or hear his name, I always feel like that I played some part in that, so it's kind of like that ripple effect. If you can affect somebody in some positive way, then whether you know it or not, you've just affected people that's around that person. Yeah. And it continues, so I always look at that and think, well, I had some hand in that at least, and it makes you feel good.
We'll go into your books now, Jim, and you've obviously written a number of books, and I was just wondering if you could tell us, first of all, just the process you use for writing your books and coming up with ideas and books that are so impactful for people. Because, it's one thing to write a book that people read, but it's another thing to write a book that people actually put into practice. So how do you go about the process of writing your books?
Well, I've written 15 books so far, and each one of them is usually about, I think the smallest one's about 250 pages, and the biggest one's 367 pages. And the process of writing, I simplify it, because I think too many people complicate it. They can't get into their heads how do you write a whole book, because they're trying to think about what goes in that whole book before you start writing. But simply, if you don't even need to come up with the title. If you just come up with, let's say, 12 points that you want to cover, 12 chapters, on whatever it is, self-esteem or whatever you want to write about. And And within that chapter, then you go, okay, under self-esteem, what do I want to cover? Then you bullet point that into maybe 8 or 10, 20 bullet points, whatever it might be. And you start writing. And I can write a 300-page book in about 30 days. And the other thing that I always do is every page has to have something impacting, something worth stopping and thinking about it, stopping and taking a note or underlining it in the book. I want something on every page in that book to be impacting. And I believe I've done that with every one of my books. So I don't know. I get ideas. The last two that I wrote, which I've written since March, since COVID hit. I've written 2 books, and I didn't put much time into it. Probably 30 days for each one of them. And one of them is called Directing the Movies of Your Subconscious Mind. And it's basically what that's about is we get programmed from childhood, and everybody kind of knows that, but at the same time, we don't know how we've been programmed. We don't know what's in there. Now, to some degree we do. We know not to touch fire because it's hot. We know, not to try to breathe underwater or whatever. We know things that protect us. And that's what the subconscious mind is designed to do, is to offer you information to protect you. But what if you were told as a child that you'll never amount to anything, you'll never measure up, and by your parents, and you keep hearing that day after day after day, put down, put down, put down, and the child goes, well, this is my authority, this is my parents, I look up to them, I love them, and they're telling me, well, it must be true. So now we don't like feeling that way when the parent tells you that, so we stuff it. And when you stuff it, it's going to surface again at some point. It is. And you're not going to like it, so you're going to stuff it again. So it just keeps building and keeps building. And then we become an adult, and now we go out to do things, and we don't realize why we keep repeating these same old cycles over and over and over. Good example, fellow just recently, he said, I haven't been able to pay my bills on time or fully each month for 25 years. I said, well, have you ever tried to change that? He said, oh, many times. He said, but I failed every time. He said, but now, I've been thinking about it. He said, I think maybe I'll just cut my overhead. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But I said, in 2, maybe 3 months at the outside, you'll be back not being able to pay your bills on time. He said, well, how do you know that? I said, because you're addicted to it. It's a core belief that you have. And I said, and you will do almost anything to prove to yourself and the outside world that you can't pay your bills every month, because that's what you believe. I said, otherwise you'd already fixed it. And I said, unless somebody walks you through how to break that addictive cycle that you're in, I said, you'll live out the rest of your life not paying your bills on time. But that's a choice you can make. And it's not just paying bills. It could be, you got the habit of procrastinating or being late for appointments. You probably know people like that. That's always late for an appointment. Well, that's an attention thing. It's an unconscious thing that they do. So when they show up late, they get attention. We're waiting on you. And also they feel kind of in control because you got 6 people in this meeting waiting on you. And so it's your deep-seated need for approval based on some programming that you have, but you don't know it. So you're trapped in a self-imposed prison that you don't know you're in, trying to break out of something you don't have the key for or even know that you're in it.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And we all have those things in various areas of our lives. So that's one book. Then the other one is it's called The Entrepreneur. why 90% fail and how to avoid the mistakes that they made. And it's true, about 90% fail. And they make mistakes, but most of the mistakes are mental mistakes. They're mostly things that they could correct, but fear takes over and runs their business and their life. So, I think those are two timely things today, because so many people are looking toward entrepreneurship today, working from home, starting a business. They lost their job, they got to do something. So I think that's very timely. And the other one, there's so many people that's going through emotional upsets right now that need to be able to learn to let go. Yeah. And if you can, what causes stress in our lives? The number one thing, and maybe the only thing that causes real stress, and that's trying to control things that's beyond your control. Trying to control the world, trying to control somebody else, trying to control a situation over which you have no control, worrying and stuff like that. All of that just burns up your creative energy and destroys your life, basically. So if I had to pick one thing that I've learned over the years, is that ability to let go and leave it. If there's something I can do, take action and do it. If there's not, leave it alone and move on. And then I'll get people say, well, it's hard to let go. It's hard to let go. I said, no, it's not. I said, you see a cell phone? I said, just because I have this cell phone doesn't mean I've got to carry it in my hand for the rest of my life. I can lay it down. Just because you had an upset 10 years ago and somebody did this to you, or you lost money someplace, doesn't mean you have to carry that with you for the rest of your life. You can lay it down. That's what letting go is choosing an alternative route.